Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Monday. It's October the 13th. It is Columbus Day. I don't know what Indigenous Peoples Day is, but apparently we are done with that, so that's good news. And because it's a federal holiday, that some of you are working unpaid, if you're in the federal government, allegedly unpaid. For those of you that are regular people and you just work on Columbus Day because it's just a regular day, I hope you're having a good one. We're going to get started with a discussion about something you probably haven't heard of before. Many of you are familiar with the concept of a black sheep. I learned something over the weekend from my wife, which is something that happens frequently. She was talking about some of her training, and her background is that she has a master's degree in marriage and family therapy and professional counseling. She did that before we got married. She did it for a little while we were married, and then as soon as we started having children, she stopped doing that at a professional level, but it doesn't mean the knowledge base is gone. We started talking about the black sheep phenomenon and where it comes from. And apparently there's a fair amount of work in this particular topic. And some of you don't realize it, but you are a black sheep. The psychological term is identified patient, as far as I can tell. And there's some significant amounts of information out there in the world if you guys want to go out and read about it yourself. When you find out that you've been ostracized from your family, when you've been excluded from those around you in your peer group, when you are no longer accepted inside of your sort of social circle, there could be a good reason for it that psychology has explained. It's not because you're the bad person. Oftentimes it's because you are the person that bucks whatever system exists that is disordered. So if there is a dysfunctional nature to a peer group, to a friend group, to a family, and the status quo of that situation is that everybody plays a role and nobody questions what that role is. If you are the person that says things that are true but uncomfortable and disrupt that role, that dysfunctional sort of nature, then you can find yourself in that category by no fault of your own. And you're looking around thinking, am I not the only sane one? And everyone looks at you like you're the problem. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. I see many of you in the chat already self-identifying. Just take a chill pill. We'll get there. I promise you all. We're going to talk about Donald Trump's victory, I guess, narrative victory that's happening in the Middle East. There's a hostage exchange taking place. Hostages being released from the folks in Gaza, the Hamas guys. They have given them back to Israel. But it made me start thinking about yellow journalism. It made me start thinking about headlines dictating conflict and involvement therein, which takes us back to the original October 7th incursion. That's interesting. I got a lot of questions about it. And I see a pretty clear similarity between things that happened to Donald Trump in Butler. I just was talking about this with George Hill this morning. So full disclosure, I've already been tapping my sources saying, hey, am I nuts? Am I seeing similar things? Just because you didn't cause something to happen doesn't mean that it wasn't predictable and that you didn't allow it. And I think the October 7th incursion and the attack on Israel in that way resulted in some very favorable outcomes for those who are in power. And we'd be remiss if we didn't notice it. So as much as people want to celebrate the release of hostages, and I think that's great for those families, I think it's great for those people, I think we all should acknowledge that you don't have to be complicit in something in so much as you are causing it to happen. But if you recognize it and you don't do something about it, I think you share some blame. And all of that goes to a broader discussion about what I sat down and talked to Steve Baker about for about 3 hours. If you guys have not seen our Sunday sit down, will you please check it out? I really would appreciate it. The best place to see it is over on Spotify. Go to KyleSerafinshow.com. We sit down and put together some pretty good information. I think if you are an open-minded person that you will find some information that you did not know over on Spotify for the long-form sit-down, the Sunday sit-down with Steve Baker. You can also join us on Locals if you guys want to get it a day early at KyleSerafin.com. If you're watching on any of the other channels, whether it be Rumble or YouTube or so on, or X, make sure you like our videos here. We appreciate that. It does boost us up. I am pretty confident in saying that our Thursday show with Joe Hanneman talking about the J6 pipe bomber and Steve Friend, I think it was the most watched video on our YouTube channel yet, ever. And it's only been out for about, 96 hours? It's not even that old. And it has already outperformed every other video we've done up there. That says something about how throttled we are over on YouTube and have been historically, but we're growing and we're getting an opportunity to have some real views. So check those things out. What we did do over there is notice things that disrupt the status quo. We acted as though we were the black sheep. And I'm being told by folks who are in a position, I don't want to divulge sourcing right now, only because I don't want to get anybody in trouble in or out of government, but it does sound like the thing that we shared on Thursday and the further discussion that I had with Steve Baker over the weekend are going to dismantle an attempt by the FBI, by our federal government to come forward and say, we have explained the J6 pipe bomb scenario, and it was a training exercise. I think that Steve Friend and I, along with Joe Hanneman and Steve Baker, have properly seeded the soil with all of the issues that would come from a government now run by Donald Trump in theory, that is an FBI that is administered by Kash Patel, that this is now fine. Everything is good. And we can come forward and give you the information about J6 and that it was a pipe bomb training exercise. And that they think that they could walk away from the fact that multiple government agencies were involved in either placing it, covering it up, lying about it over the years, and that the FBI itself is to blame for at least the cover-up portion of it by dramatically reducing the capability of the public to be able to help them, by downgrading the footage, by changing the aspect ratio, by pretending that it was something, that it was a real problem, when in reality they would have always known. If it was in fact a training exercise, they would have known that right away, and it would have been an easy explanation. So they carried narrative water. They can't go out there and try to excuse this simply as a training exercise, as one former podcaster, now deputy director of the FBI, once predicted. So I've got some footage from the B-roll there. Before we get into all of the things that we've got to talk about today, which are substantial, and there are a fair number of them, let's talk about scams. Let's talk about people trying to steal from you. We had one of our listeners over on Locals say that he had a problem with Patriot Protect, and in about 72 hours or less, it was resolved. I saw 3 posts out there. I think that's very telling. Patriot-protect.com/KYLE. My experience has been quite good with these folks. I think they're good people, and if you guys have a problem with them, I want to know about it, but it does sound like they're getting resolved if you do have something that happens on the wrong end of it. What do? They look out for criminals and scammers and folks that are trying to sell your personal information online, your phone, your workplace, your address, your email, your family members, etc. They can all be exposed with a few clicks. Data breaches make more sensitive information available, but even just the people search websites and the data brokers can be a threat to you. They can have people help find your family. It is essentially like a doxing capability that people are going to go out there. Yeah, we grew up in an era when they were telephones, but you know what? And telephone books. There's a little bit more nastiness by people. They think they can get away with doing uglier things. So if you want to make yourself less searchable by Google and less available to scammers who want to try to steal money from you, to try to take the things that are rightly yours, either signing up to pretend to be you, or if they're going to call and actually stalk you or scam you by giving information that they should not actually be able to have. In my case, I have to worry about people using AI fakes of my voice to my family members. I make it harder for them to find by using Patriot Protect. Again, it's patriot-protect.com/Kyle. It's a couple dollars a month for an annual subscription. Use my name at checkout. You'll save 15% on that. And you guys can just sort of make yourself a harder target. And you ought to. Check them out. If you have any issues, I want to know about it. So let us know over on Locals or info@KyleSerafin.com. What I am pleased to say is that one of our listeners that identified a problem immediately got back to and said, nope, they made it right. They fixed this. Good on them. It took a couple of days. But you know, that's the way it works in the world. Okay, let's protect ourselves. Let's talk about a black sheep phenomenon, AKA the identified patient. And let's talk about hostages and this concept of yellow journalism. I've got a really fun palate cleanse from 1982. It's going to make you guys smile. These lies have been going on for as long as I've been alive, and as long as any of you have been alive, even though many of you are older than I am. Here we go. All right, so let's do the identified patient. That seems like a sterile term for black sheep. But it is the medical or psychological definition. I want to read this. This is coming from a slightly different article over at medcircle.com. It's an article talking about this phenomenon of black sheep, the identified patient, signs and recovery. What is the identified patient? Often known as the black sheep or a scapegoat, the identified patient is a targeted source of a family system's dysfunction. I'm going to actually suggest to you that it can be also part of your friend group. If your friend group has certain parameters under which they operate, everybody has a role. You're the comedian, you're the moral center, you're the life of the party, you're the fill in the blank. If you start disrupting those roles, you can find yourself in this category of black sheep, scapegoat, identified patient. If you change the way that a group interacts. The identified patient is often labeled during childhood, and this role can cause serious consequences for people later in life. This is specifically to your family scenario. I think it can be broadened out, again, to your social construct, even your work environment. Everybody does fit into a role. Certain people take on certain characteristics. This is why those who have been in a job for a long period of time, they will sort of sit into a comfortable expectation of the way that other people will engage with them. Therapists use the term identified patient within the context of family therapy. Whether it's overt or covert, these individuals have a key role in maintaining the family's homeostasis. Not all families have an identified patient, but many toxic or dysfunctional systems have them, even if they don't quite recognize it. Identified patients simplify family distress. Instead, each family member recognizes their part in the system. Everyone can redirect to one person as being the problem. There are ways that you can check this stuff out. I shared this over with my buddies at the Suspendables. They've all looked into their own sort of parent-family situations and said, yes, many of these things are common for them. Identified patients can exist in families that have intergenerational trauma patterns. I think if you look broadly speaking in the United States, our nation has been going through significant amounts of trauma for a very long time, to the point where we just internalize it. We think it's normal. We don't even realize how bad these systems are. The fact that we have neglectful, the fact that when I was growing up and when you were growing up, no matter how old you are, whether you're older or younger than I am, you've always believed that Congress is crooked, that our government is corrupt. And yet everybody still goes and cheerleads on the person that they try to elect in. And this is going to be the person that changes it. And yet they never do. Isn't that interesting? We've internalized this idea that somehow we're going to vote our way out of it, and yet never does the voting actually change it, including this most consequential election that happened in November of last year with Donald Trump. Have we fixed it? Have they gotten rid of the IRS? Are there people that are still being prosecuted for gun crimes that shouldn't even exist because we've had Supreme Court decisions say otherwise? Do we have a DOJ that recognizes all of our civil liberties? No. Have we replaced all of our income tax with tariff revenue? No. No, we haven't. We're going to cover some of the tariff situations. Trump made a threat on Friday that tanked some of the market. So if you guys are watching your daily balances in your 401ks or in your stock portfolios, you may have seen a big dip. I saw one on mine. And it's all about whether or not he's going to follow through with a tariff threat to China, which concerns businesses. Far more than a government shutdown, it turns out. Some of the other things are substance abuse, forms of addiction. Maybe the addiction that our country has with cheap money and inexpensive products coming in from third world nations. Unreliable or neglectful caregivers. I think we can also apply that to the people that quote unquote rule this country. Narcissistic caregivers. I think we see that as well. Continuous stressors like financial stress, medical issues, relocation, unexpected pregnancies and divorce, and so on and so forth. All the things that can make your family difficult. We have them on a national scale as well in this American family. And I think that's quite interesting. So when you are the person that points out, hey, these things are not right, there are some things out here that we should be concerned about, folks. You know, when your team is the one in power, then you become the scapegoat. It's actually your fault for noticing it. You're the black sheep. How dare you? Why can't you just coalesce? This is not the time. What about the movement? I've heard all of these things. I've heard these things from very prominent and powerful voices. The people that trade on fear, they trade on false senses of unity, they trade on an us versus them sort of mentality. And whenever it's us, then we have to back the machine because now it's our machine. When in reality, it turns out we can pretty easily tell that the machine continues to serve itself. I've got an example from this interview that Patel did at the FBI the other day. Now, one of the reasons that I focus on the FBI as much as I do, not just because I know about it, not just because I know what's going on there more than most people do, but also because it represents a bad faith actor that is truly misunderstood, that we have simplified in this country. And I hear so many people talking about it that don't know anything about what this animal is, to include people that are actually running it right now. It's our FBI because it went out and stopped the people that threatened Benny Johnson's family. I've gotten threats to my family. I've submitted them to the FBI. Never got a follow-up, not once. If you had a threat to your family and you submitted it to the FBI, you also would not get a follow-up. It is very unlikely that you would. If you went in through the National Threat Operations Center, you're not going to fit into one of the categories because you're not one of the people that can add benefits or value. So you'll be ignored, just like I'd be ignored, just like people on the left might now be ignored. This is a us versus them mentality. This is a friend-foe type scenario. We're in a world where, because, quote unquote, our people are at the helm, we've got to back it up. We've got to support it. They're the good guys. I focus in on it because when everything changes, when the next person is in charge of government, whether it's another Republican or whether it's a Democrat, and I suspect that at some point in time there will be Democrats. That's the nature of things, that things change, they swing back and forth. Whenever that happens, we will again be on the receiving end, we being people who just are inconveniently pointing out these are true things. We are going to be the identified patient that says there is disorder here, and it doesn't matter who's in charge, it's a problem. Whenever that happens, we will again be targeted. So for a period of time, some of you may feel like we're safe. Donald Trump is running the country. But you've been given ample evidence over and over again throughout your lifetimes, but even during these last 9 months or so, that regardless of who is, quote, running the country, the people that are inside of the government that make up this federal agency, whether it be the FBI or the DOJ or broadly speaking DHS, there is never going to be true accountability. You cannot say this and that government. You cannot say this and that FBI. You cannot say this and that DHS. It's the same people. So the thing that should scare the living hell out of you is that they are able to bat back and forth what side they sort of are representing play for. What they're showing you is that there are no principles whatsoever at play. And if you call that out, you are the problem. I want you to listen to this clip about interrupting domestic terrorist organizations, and I want you to actually feel a chill run down your spines. Because not 11 months ago, you, someone listening to this podcast, regardless of what your politics are, could easily have been described as a domestic terrorist. And there is a strong to almost 100% probability that you will again be listed that way. The reason that I advocate against things like federal intervention, the reason that I do not think that a prosecution of a James Comey, however satisfying it may be in the interim, the reason that I don't even think going after a Letitia James, again, 0 tears for those people facing consequences, screw them. I do not care about them individually. What I care about is what they represent, which is the same problem that I saw about a search warrant being served at Donald Trump's house. What it said was, whatever we do is not just going to be the thing that we decided and the danger that it's going to do. We don't care about consequences in the long run. We care about satisfaction right now. What I really care about is the precedent is that the weapon system is continuing to operate as it was designed, and the people within it are continuing to take all of the instructions they're supposed to be given. And if you say no, then you're the black sheep. Then you are the identified patient. Look at this pretty, cutesy, pink little cutouts. There's scissors on the screen here. There's a little stick family there, or whatever you call those things, the paper puppets. This is a cutesy story. It seems so thoughtful and nice to be able to go out and have your kids cut out a little girl in a dress and a mom in a dress and a dad, and they're these little paper silhouettes. That's not threatening. What it tells us is that the identified patient scenario, the black sheep, the scapegoat, the same way that you've been potentially ostracized from family by saying inconveniently true things, is the same thing that happens to people inside of all systems, to include our federal government, to include any of these weaponized agencies, the ones that actually hold weapons. I don't care if we're talking about the IRS, they hold weapons. How about the Commerce Department, which was brought up by Steve Baker on Sunday's Sit Down? They have armed FBI or armed 1811 agents. How about all of the DHS entities, to include like a military? Because the Coast Guard is part of that. Our ICE, our Border Patrol, all of these people can be used for good or for evil. They can, and apparently what we found out is that they're willing to do it. How do we know that? Because even though there's a mission set that requires ICE to do certain things, that requires our Border Patrol to do certain things, they allowed the border to stay open. And we've seen the effective rate of the border crossings illegally in this country taken down to almost zero. Why would that be? The same people work there. They did what they were told. Why would it be that hundreds of January 6ers were arrested by this point in the Biden administration, October 11th of 2021, like 700 of them, to the point where almost 2,000 were arrested total over a period of 4 years, really striking fear in the hearts of people that didn't like what was happening in the summer of love in 2020 and thought that there was a problem with the election in November of 2020. What about all that? They did what they were told to. What we've seen is regardless of who is in charge, the people that disrupt the system, that call out the problems, they are in fact that same identified patient. They are the ones who speak an inconvenient, accurate statement, and they threaten to disrupt the status quo of how these dysfunctional systems work. And so identified patients are also whistleblowers oftentimes. I know that was the case where I was. I went back and read some congressional testimony about who I was, by the way, according to these people, as they were being interviewed. This is all relevant because it was happening right after, during the investigations into the pipe bombing. And so I had my former boss, several of them were called out and said, what did you know about Seraphin? Did he have any performance related issues while he was an employee? And they're like, no, not to my knowledge. I mean, he wasn't an exceptional performer, but he wasn't a problem. Basically, I didn't know who he was. Which would make sense because I was only in the office for 5 years and they were only in the office for like 18 months tops in these jobs. Why would they know who I was if I wasn't someone doing either like significant problems or like the most senior star of the show? They didn't ask Jennifer Moore about that because she had to write me a pretty prominent award, what would used to be known as a QSI or a quality step increase, which means you got promoted above peers. You got to get a boost in your annual salary. I got one of those in 2020 because of the work we did just before I got sent out and then was removed. But if you call out the problems in the system, then you're the issue. We continue to see that. Don't tell me that the things have changed. Don't tell me that we are now, the patriots are back in charge, that the adults are running the show, that Donald Trump is the great peacemaker. I don't believe any of this stuff. What I believe is that we are just shown certain things because it's convenient. Let me show you this interview with the owner of the Baltimore Sun. I think it's the Baltimore Sun. I think his name is Armstrong. He has interesting access to Patel considering who he is. There's some interesting reporting. I don't know how valid it is, and I've been shying away from it from Project Veritas about this man. But this question and answer is incredibly telling, talking about the single thing that I continue to harp on, the fact that the Federal Bureau of Investigations actually instigates a lot of the problems. This is going to go to the bigger problem of how did January 6th happen? It's going to go to many of your questions about how many times have patriot groups been set up? Is it a political issue on left or right? And the answer is it is not. It is whatever is convenient to the FBI to be able to justify their existence. And Patel actually says this, and he should know better. because I thought he was one of those people targeted. Yet another example of once you become part of the system, you actually defend the system. Those of you who saw that episode with Joe Hanneman and with Steve Friend, you know this. Once you get that seat of power, you immediately abandon all the priorities you had that got you there, and you immediately start defending the seat of power in order to hold on to that power so that you can wield it. It kind of reminds me of this moment in the movie Pumping Iron. Those of you guys who have seen Pumping Iron, you know that there's Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's a documentary about him lifting weights, and it's very 1970s or early 80s because he can say things that you could never say. And at one point in time, he's laying on the beach. He's got all these bodybuilders around him. It's a very homoerotic scene. So super muscular guys, like slicked up, and they're all getting their tan on. And one of the guys goes, what about Lou Ferrigno? He's going to come in and, try to unseat you. And Arnold Schwarzenegger says something that's really funny. He's like, yeah, the wolf at the top of the mountain, everyone that's at the bottom of the mountain is more hungry. They're hungry and they want to take but the wolf at the top of the mountain, he wants to stay there because he likes the food that's there. That's my shitty Arnold. He says that the hungry wolves are trying to snap at him in order to get up there and take the top because he's king of the mountain. But he wants to stay there just as much as they want to get up there too, because he also wants to keep the food that's there. That's what I just heard in this clip here. I found this over the weekend. This was like one of the more unsettling pieces. And it points back to the status quo being undefeated. The status quo will always ostracize whistleblowers, identified patients, scapegoat, black sheep. Take your pick. If you call things out for being as they are, and it threatens to disrupt status quo, then in fact, you are the problem.
Is the FBI, Mr. Director, up to the task of penetrating domestic terrorist groups? And why do we have to wait for someone to die before we make an arrest? In Germany, they made an arrest before someone died. In the UK, they did not.
I can't speak for the UK and Germany,
but are we up for the task here?
We absolutely are. And the American public across the country sees it. We defeat and disrupt these acts before they happen. More importantly, we have individuals who are accessing these group chats, working for us or as a source with us, who are penetrating the nodes and allowing us to use the intelligence authorities that the FBI has, partnering with our intelligence community to seize and suspend and disrupt these operations before they happen. And most of the time, the American public doesn't hear about those. But when we can bring an arrest, we're very public and we're very loud about those because we want the American public to know we are disrupting.
I'm going to put that up over on our locals channel. It's about 50 seconds. And it might be the most telling reason why the man who is the director of this FBI has zero business doing this work. He just told you exactly what's up there. He told you that the FBI has people in all these chat groups, that they're constantly doing disruptions, and that when they make an arrest, they tell everybody about it. Whenever they get anything of value, they tell everybody about it. And the things that they tell you about are so mundane and stupid and ridiculous. They're almost always set up by the FBI. I thought he knew that. I thought that was the entire point of why he was going in there, to dismantle it. I thought we had people that were walking in that understood the problem is that our government creates the problem and then it solves it. And this is not new. This is not new at all. And in fact, I think it has a lot to do with what happened in October 2 years ago in Israel. You don't have to actually make things happen. The FBI does. That's their MO. But broadly speaking, a more sophisticated organization doesn't need to create terrorism. They just allow it to go down. It's my belief, ongoing, and I don't think I can be dissuaded of it, and I don't think there's enough information out there to say otherwise, that Israel is too sophisticated an organization to have actually had a bunch of guys with lawnmowers strapped on their back get the jump on them. And even if they had been bad in their intel, if it had been a low-tech plot and they were too focused on high technology, this was the argument, by the way, that Israel made. We were so focused on the sophisticated plots that we allowed a bunch of people with lawnmowers who were using old bricks and sticks type tradecraft. Those people got away with it. And they pulled off the attack. I don't believe that a nation that constantly thinks that it is in an existential, survival-based threat role is unable to respond quicker than it did. I think that they got everything that they wanted after that attack. I think that the federal government got everything that it wanted after what happened on January the 6th of 2021. I think that the United States has been doing things like this, and broadly speaking, countries have been doing things like this for all time. This is the oldest tactic in the book. I think that there are people inside the United States government who would have been totally fine with Donald Trump being killed in Butler, PA. That doesn't mean they set it up, folks. It just means that they allowed things to go further when they should have actually gone out there and stopped something. If they had done the job, then you wouldn't have the problem. But that's not sexy. For the FBI, they need a real, actual threat. There needs to actually be someone, not who just says some bad things and they called up. Imagine if your FBI was involved in this. Imagine if they were monitoring online chats and they had credible information that somebody wanted to do something stupid, or maybe someone just floated a bad idea and that person ended up knock on the door. And a guy like me goes up there and goes, look, man, you've been involved with an FBI undercover and or confidential human informant who has reported some of your terrible ideas. And I'm here to tell you that we're aware of them. You ought not do them. They're in violation of federal law. And the next time that I have to knock on your door about this, it is going to involve handcuffs and it's going to involve a prison sentence. Is that clear? And the person goes, holy crap, I'm just a stupid college kid. I had no idea. Yes, that's understood. We could scare them straight. We could say, it sounds like you've got some real mental problems here. We'd like to get you some help. So we've brought some of our state partners here who are able to do a Baker Act. We're going to do an involuntary thing. We're here to take you to a place where they can talk to you, maybe get you on medication, whatever the requirement is. I'm not a big fan of psychological medications, but sometimes that is the option for people. You need some help, whatever that help looks like. Therapy, institutionalization, so on. There are some people that cannot be part of our society. Imagine if we did that proactively. Well, there's no terrorist budget for that, folks. I'll just tell you right up front. You're not going to be able to go to Congress and claim that we disrupted a terrorist threat before it became a terrorist threat. That's not how it works. So you wouldn't get that thing. Just saying. You would not get the value that the FBI gets out of what they do instead, which is that they make friends with this person. They encourage that person. They provide them with all the worst things that they would need to be able to do their worst ideas. They tell them it's a great idea. It's kind of like the Chat GPT thing we saw the other day and the other sort of online chatbots that said, why would you go to your parents and say that you're having suicidal thoughts when you could just remove the problem? You could just end your own life. And the person who is 13, 14, 15 years old doesn't have a perfectly well-developed cognitive process. They decide, okay, yeah, I'm going to off myself. That's what's going to happen next. And the chatbot's like, good job. That's what should happen. Isn't that problematic? We have a federal government that is incentivized to allow bad things to happen, and it's been doing it forever. This morning, while I was talking to George Hill, I was reminded of the 1898 explosion on February the 15th of the U.S. Navy battleship, the USS Maine. You guys familiar with this one? The USS Maine exploded. And as far as we can tell, there were any number of problems with the powder magazine or some other things. But it was immediately hailed by the press in a way that was going to be favorable to the outcome that William Randolph Hearst wanted to go out there and push. And it was immediately pinned on the Spanish government. And it gave us an opportunity to have an armed conflict. There's two ways that yellow journalism can work, and that's what it used to be called, yellow journalism. We're still living in a time of yellow journalism, folks. One possibility is something happens and we immediately describe it in a way that we cannot substantiate, but it has a huge emotional impact. Remember the Maine. The headline, which was pushed out there by the Maine, and I have to look it up again because I saw it. It was something like Maine sunk by Spanish. It was really, really straightforward and salacious. We had similar problems like that in Pearl Harbor. You guys in the chat are following along with this right away. Now, whether they knew that there was an inbound attack or they allowed it to happen, or whether there was just not as much of a response, things weren't staffed up properly, allowing these things to go down. That's what the FBI currently does, because the budget only happens, the action only happens when they get what they need. They need something to rally behind. Our FBI requires a terrorist to be able to walk out. And they walk out every damn one of them. And what you just heard in that clip, which I thought was really damning, was exactly what happens. There's an online undercover. There's a CHS, a confidential human source that's hanging out in these chats, goading people along, and they try to get it to the point where they can arrest and disrupt the so-called domestic terrorist network, which, by the way, 5 seconds ago was you. If you had a contrary opinion to what our government does. If you're the identified patient in your group, for any moment, if you're the person who points out, like, you know what, I think the Maine might have been just a problem on our end. I don't think we need to go to war with Spain over it. I think that we probably should have been more prepared for Pearl Harbor. It was pretty obvious that there was this issue. How did we not catch a bunch of Japanese fighters coming in? You guys just have a list of them running in the chat. Gulf of Tonkin, 9/11, Butler, PA. They all exist. October 7th. All of these things that happened when we should have known better, but it gave us an opportunity to do a thing that the machine wanted. And if you're the noticer, if you're the black sheep, if you're the scapegoat there, then you're the problem. If you're the identified patient, you can't call these things out. And that's when you get labeled a conspiracy theorist. The problem with the conspiracy theorists is half the time they don't understand what it is. They've actually gone and they've created all these leaps that don't exist. I watched Candace Owens doing this right now. I watched a couple of clips of her this morning and I went like, good God. Just because something was allowed to happen doesn't mean that the people who allowed it to happen actually goaded on. They don't need to. There are constantly sick, twisted, mentally ill people in this world that are attempting to do things that make no sense. And a proper society would reach out to those people, especially if we were a real Christian organization. If this country actually did have Christianity at its founding and really looked at people, not just like, this is what I'm legally required to do, but actually said, this is what I am morally and this is what I am ethically required to do, that I'm going to reach out to my neighbor and I'm going to look after them and I'm going to find out when they're going on hard times, that I'm going to be the one who steps in. You see your neighbor can't pay rent, so you help them. No, what do? We think that there should be a government subsidy. We think that somebody should solve the problem for us, and maybe we could do it at a governmental level. And the more that the government steps in, the less that we want to step in and deal with it. And I think that's fairly interesting. You don't have to goad things on to simply allow them to unfold in a way that they would not otherwise have been done. And all you got to do, and then all you got to do is make some excuses. It was a failure. It wasn't our fault. It was a training exercise. How could we have known? Not everybody's always talking to each other at the same time. Some people were warning us about this, and they've gone, the easiest way to take them from the outside into the inside, from being a voice that is a scapegoat, is to shower them with praise and give them responsibility within the system.
Somebody's setting us up, and I want to know who's in on it. You watch now. That bomb was planted after. And it's all going to be phrased when they get caught for trying to frame MAGA people for a fake assassination plot. It's all going to be framed as a training exercise. This is going to be the biggest flag it ever on this show. Oh, was this a training exercise? We dropped this. It was like a red cell thing. We were just testing the security. Watch. They were not testing the security. This was 100% a setup.
And that guy that you just saw on the screen right there is pissed that we, at this program, this little show that we do, and the guys over at The Blaze are digging in and scratching into things, exposing that you can't call it a training exercise without a lot more explanations, which that guy who you saw there used to actually agree you needed to give. Isn't that interesting? The easiest way to help somebody who's been scapegoated, who's been identified patient, who's been black sheeped, you just make them part of the system and you make them integral in the system. You're now in charge of the system. It's now your system, so you're responsible for it. Boop. Neutralized. Isn't that something? That guy is making calls, has his subordinates that are involved in PR making calls. They're pissed that they cannot float the training exercise BS, which he would have called out as BS 9 months ago, 10 months ago. Pretty wild. It's wild to watch it happen. But these are like very old constructs in human psychology, for whatever that's worth. All right. I'm going to read for my friends over at Silent. One of you guys said the word of the day is Faraday. That's actually a good idea if you guys want to keep your stuff under wraps. I'm constantly doing it here. Actually, I've got 2 Faraday bags sitting on here. This is one. This is my waterproof. This one can hang from like handlebars and go places with us. And it can hold some bigger equipment, especially stuff I want to keep before we go and use it when I'm traveling. This is the thinner one that I use for the phone. I've actually got a couple of other sleeves as well, including one that's big enough for my entire laptop. Folks, check out my friends over at Silent. Your phone is a tracking device. People who went to January 6th know this better than anybody. If you want to turn that thing off, you may not be able to do it by just removing the battery. You probably have to do something additional. Silent allows you to do that because government agencies and big tech and corporate data brokers and cyber criminals and anybody else that has nefarious intent could be fighting for a piece of your digital footprint. They don't have to ask for it and they just take it. And that is why the Faraday products at Silent exist. They'll shut down all of the Wi-Fi signals, all of the cellular, the Bluetooth, the GPS, the RFID, the near-field communications. You name it, no signal means no tracking, no remote access. Nobody can figure out what you're doing with your device. It is yours. The information is yours. Protect it. slnt.com/Kyle is the website. silentnovowels.com/Kyle. There's a link below here in the show description. slnt.com/Kyle saves you 15% on any of the stuff that they have that's qualified. You're going to get free shipping on most orders. They are not the cheapest products out there. They're just the ones that work. You can buy cheap Chinesium garbage. It will fall apart and it will not actually do the thing it's supposed to do. We regularly prove that with testing when I was working for the FBI. Guys, this is the same side of technology that special operations teams use worldwide when they're going to infiltrate, when they're doing some of these ops that you guys are worried about. Yeah, some of them are actually working on behalf of America. Go figure. There actually are good guys working out there, and they use these tools as well. You can protect your family, your freedoms, your digital footprint. You can also just get a moment of peace and quiet and silent at the dinner table. slnt.com/KYLE. Drop your phone in a silent Faraday sleep. Get off the grid. Get silent. Be invisible to the outside world. Take control of that little digital footprint on your own. You might as well. There's a bunch of other stuff going on, and we're going to cover the sort of the Hamas story because we need to. But I want you to consider that the broader narrative that I keep seeing is the same sort of environment where we saw this set up for January 6th. I see that we're being led down this path one more time. We're being led down a path where outrage, seated concerns, and the same repeated messaging pops up. Donald Trump talked a lot about fake news. He's not wrong about that. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. There is always a factual basis for saying these. He got a lot of negative news coverage. They were obviously biased against him starting from before he was even elected. To the point where in November of 2016, everybody who was asked anything believed that there was a 90+% chance that Hillary Clinton was going to be the president of the United States. You guys remember that? How many of you remember Hillary Clinton was a shoo-in because that's what was being told? As soon as the election took place, we had this complete upheaval. Why was that? Nobody knows. Oh, it was Jim Comey's fault. Jim Comey was actually working on behalf of Trump to set up. Oh, there was all kinds of other issues that were going on. All of these like scandalous stories were dropped out there, right? And we had the voting machines and we had all this other kind of stuff. But Donald Trump wins in November of 2016. And everybody goes, that's because the good guys win. Then we had the alternate happen in November of 2020. Why is that? That's because the bad guys won. To me, it looks like we've just been set up over and over and over again. We're constantly being set up with messaging campaigns. We had Dan Bongino go out and say that there was going to be a training exercise excuse, and now Dan Bongino is pissed because he wants there to be a training exercise excuse because he now works at the FBI. This is a tweet from Occupy Democrats, which is one of the more influential Democrat groups over on X. They're messaging something that I've told you guys about a couple times on this program already. I'm going to read their post here. Why has Dominion Voting Systems been settling defamation lawsuits with Trump allies who falsely claim the company stole the 2020 election? And they give an example. Well, red alert, people. It's obvious that Dominion lost value and could be bought for pennies on the dollar, and in swoops a pro-election interference buyer that changes the name to something super American sounding, and now they're going to comply with whatever the Trump administration says. It sounds like a potentially rigged election with voting machines that Donald Trump was completely against having in 2020. That's all cool now. So the swerve is in play, and Trump is truly trying to rig the midterms. I've played you state, local, and federal election candidates claiming that we are going to see a rigged midterm election. It's my belief that stuff like this and this messaging campaign is not on accident. It is very, very intentional. And it is getting the people who are most likely to be violent and outraged and fall into the categories of doing something kinetic to give the machine a reason to act. This is the same setup that we saw in November 2020 and what happened in January of 2021. Outrage, public impression manipulation. I don't know if the elections were rigged in 2020. I have the same information that you guys do. It looked ugly. There were things that were not investigated. We know that our Federal Bureau of Investigation, by the way, the same people work there that said, okay, fine, we're not going to do election interference investigations. Those same people, for the most part, are still doing those works. They're doing something else. But millions of people were really upset, and tens of thousands of them went, maybe hundreds of thousands of them went to the Capitol on January 6th of 2021, and hundreds of them got violent for some reason and did things they've never done before, as I've talked about with Steve Baker, for hours on end. And now you're seeing a group of people being remobilized. It's not just the few actors. What I found, and this is the reason why I'm going to be going and covering the No Kings protest coming up this Saturday. What I found is that the No Kings protest people are not interesting. They're really not. They're not particularly educated on the system. They have the same propaganda talking points that you'd expect that we cover here on the left-wing media all the time. What's interesting is the after party. And I wouldn't know it unless I went to the after party. So I stood in the sun and I sweated with all the people out there in July or whatever it was. You walk around, it's a bunch of lefties saying lefty things. They're holding signs. I don't agree with them, but they're not my enemy. They're really not. They're just like, people who have different information and they see the same things and they think alternate things. That's fine. We can agree on that in America. We can agree to disagree. Seriously, not your enemy either. That's what I found. And then you see the people at night. When the lights go out, street lights come on, and you start seeing maybe a few hundred tops, but really like 100 to 150, like pretty aggressive agitators, at least in the Austin area. They gathered outside the ICE building, and they went face to face with cops and screamed at them that were antagonizing and attempting to provoke over and over the mounted, the bicycle, the foot patrols. All the cops suddenly had these people that were really aggressive that were not there at the real rally, at the political rally, where they were having discussions of things that we don't agree with. They show up. It's a very small number. The game is, can you get enough of the people that are at the regular rally that we don't agree with, but are acting in a completely lawful way? They're having political speeches. They're saying things that we don't like, but we don't care if they say it because they're allowed to. They're not trying to get violent. They're simply posting up and doing the thing that the First Amendment allows them to do. The things that all liberals and libertarians and even regular conservative people should look at and go like, yeah, you're entitled to say those things, even if I don't like it. Then there's the people that do the violence. The key is, can you get the violent agitators, the lunatic fringe of it, to actually bring in some of those otherwise lawful, peaceful, honest operators that have information that we don't agree with? Can you make those paths combine? They did that in 2020, did they not? They got through this yellow journalism nonsense. They got the George Floyd riots to kick off because the people who think that cops shouldn't be killing black men who are unarmed, which, by the way, I also think that. I just don't think it happens in the way that it was said. They want to get the people that think that cops should be doing the right thing and that they should have a code of honor, they should actually be accountable to the people. All those things are not bad. They got them to believe something different than was reality. They got them to believe what the leftist, lunatic, Marxist, marching, violent agitators from Antifa were trying to say, which is that we need to burn the system down and we need to do it violently. And they got those things to mix. And we saw a lot of violence with a lot of people that were doing coverage for that. And we are going to see it again with this. You tell me that they are not messaging to the, let's say, reasonable, but I would say inaccurate left-wing base that there's going to be a stolen election. So regardless of what the things are, if they take the House, they're going to just impeach Trump. That's what they'll do. If they don't take the House in the midterms, if they don't take back the Senate in these things, then they're going to claim it's rigged. So this is a no-lose situation, and it's being set up. And it's being set up through, I would say, coverage like this with, it starts on the extreme left. This is the Midas Touch Network interviewing Gavin Newsom, but we've seen it on CBS. I've now seen it on CNN. I've seen it on MSNBC. They are coming up and saying the thing that I saw the people on the right say in 2021. And why does nobody get tired of being a ping pong ball? And why do I and you maybe have to sit there and go, guys, this is clear that we're getting played. If you're the person saying that we're getting played, then you're the identified patient. You're the black sheep. I can see this clear as day, and I think many of you will as well. Here's Gavin Newsom. He's a state level, potentially a future presidential candidate, saying exactly the thing that would get people motivated to get really violent. Because if you don't have consent of the governed, then you don't have a legitimate government. That's the key. Consent of the governed, right? Legitimacy is really predicated on the fact that it's actually doing the job in the system the way it's supposed to, that there's actually fairness in the election. And once you start using words like rigged, everything is completely on the table.
And we'll present this to the voters on a special election that happens to coincide with other municipal elections on November 4th. It is a sprint. And if California, one of the most un-Trump states in America, is not successful, at our peril, we may not get this back. I'm telling you, we may not. He is rigging this next midterm election before one vote is cast. He tried to wreck our democracy after the last vote was cast the last time. Now he's doing it in plain sight. And we have to have our sights focused, laser focused on winning, fighting fire with fire, no longer on our back heels, on our toes. We drive the narrative. We drive the reforms. We drive the talking points, surround sound, not just California, all of us, we the people, states, large and small, all across this country. It is time for action, no longer words.
If you guys saw what was behind him, Election Rigging Response Act, the Defend Democracy statements, we the people, all the same kind of mouthed talking points that we've heard from the so-called patriot groups. Isn't that interesting? The same exact language will motivate the base. And then I saw this morning from Barack Obama over on CNN's website. The Trump administration has been working with businesses and they've been conceding. Obama is ripping concessions that businesses and others have made to Donald Trump. That's what fascism looks like, people. That is exactly how Barack Obama governed. That is exactly what the Biden administration did. They used the same terms. And what did we call out? We said, well, look, all these social media companies, these big tech platforms, all of these people have done exactly the thing that they would do in a fascist organization. What would they do? They would get leaned on by the federal government, and the federal government would increase their policies and then give them a lot of sort of coverage from the federal end. They're not mandating it. They're just incentivizing it. We learned this in the Twitter files. We learned this because people like Mark Warner said there's a carrot and a stick attitude. Do what we want, and you're going to get what you like. Don't, and we're going to cause heavy regulation on all of you over speech and everything else. All of these people, it's not projection. It's simply that they are both playing their own side. They're falling into the role of opposition versus the role of establishment, but they're the same role. They just trade at different times. And the people that are going to have the problem, which is traditional in marriage and family therapy, is traditional in professional counseling in America, and like just generally in human psychology, if you are a disruptive force that says, hey, I see what you guys are doing. What you're doing is dividing us using the same talking points. You were arguing the opposite 4 years ago. So what they really do is they just step into the role. This is the role of the governing party, and this is the role of the not governing party. And everybody makes accusations. And if you notice that, it's like, hey, weren't you saying the exact same thing just a couple of minutes ago? Weren't you saying that this is our FBI? You can't change this animal. The animal is the same. This is Kash Patel the other day. He's sitting with Todd Blanche, who looks pretty uncomfortable for some reason. And Patel is saying something about what? The federal government was subpoenaing records of senators. You can't say this and that FBI when it's the same FBI, and all we did was change the name on the door. The name on the door now says Director Patel. What's the difference between Director Ray? They did the same thing to whoever, and they came out and they said, whoa, Donald Trump was going after his political opponents. That's what they're going to say today. Oh, he's going after his political opponents and demonizing these federal employees. The problem is the machine. The problem is that status quo. The problem is the way that the system actually works every time. And the funniest thing is there's some more crying about whether or not the federal government is going to reopen. How many of you knew that today was a federal holiday and that the federal government shut down in any meaningful way? Does anyone even notice outside of the few people that actually get a federal check? It's like 1% of the population notices. It means 99 out of 100 do not. And even of that 1%, a bunch of them are still going to go to work and they're all going to be made whole in the end. And as long as you're not living paycheck to paycheck on a federal salary, you won't even notice. But the people who do that job, they just did what they were told. They did subpoenas into sitting Republicans. They'll do them into Democrats when that's required. They'll go out there and prosecute Letitia James. They'll go out and prosecute Jim Comey. They'll go out and get the phone records for Ron Johnson and for Lindsey Graham. Is that really? Are those the most Republican-y people? No. It's just what was being done. These are the people that were saying the thing that was on the opposite side. The system is working as it's designed. And the opposition has just switched roles. Now they're the ones claiming rigged elections. Here's Patel feigning outrage, I guess, because that's what your job is when you're the fake leader.
Just step back and think about it for a second. You have, as you now know of, 8 sitting United States senators whose phone records were subpoenaed by the Department of Justice in the prior administration. For what? For what purpose? None of these senators are criminals. They have no criminal activity associated with them whatsoever. Why did the Department of Justice and Jack Smith go in there and authorize subpoenas? And it's not just them, there's others. And so what we're doing in our transparency, in our commitment to transparency, and our initiative at FBI and DOJ is putting the records out, providing them to Congress, letting them conduct oversight. But we will also internally investigate those involved. We've already disbanded the Public Corruption Squad at WFO. We've already jettisoned these people at the FBI that were involved in the politicization of law enforcement. And if there needs to be a criminal investigation, you better believe it, we're on it. Just step back and think about it.
Isn't it funny that he just said that if there needs to be a criminal investigation, didn't he just tell you everything that you need to know? Wasn't all the talking going to be that all these people need to be held accountable and they all need to find something to pin on them? How many of you people thought there was going to be a treason or a seditious conspiracy charge? Remember, the left doesn't play by the rules. The right actually tries to, even when they don't do a great job. They're really unnatural when they step into the role of doing this game. I always tell you guys that like one team is playing checkers or chess and the other team, what are they doing? They're playing demolition derby. They're driving over the top of the tables with like a monster truck. Yeah, there should be a response, but the response is not, oh, well, let's build a safe wall and then really, really make sure that people understand what the rules are to chess or checkers. No, the answer is that you shouldn't play chess or checkers there anymore. And you should probably take apart the monster truck that they're driving. You should deflate the tires. You should pull the engine on the damn thing. You should sugar the gas tank so it can no longer drive. That would be the right answer. Instead, they're going to try to use it for their own purposes. What did we get under Biden? We got 2,000 people or so prosecuted for this like Reichstag Fire Act situation. This thing that was probably allowed to happen and looks like the government was in on actually helping set up parts of it. At the very end of it, they were at least complicit in doing a cover-up. The Bureau did a cover-up. We know they did because they gave you information. I played you guys a video the other day. That was from January 6th of 2025. The FBI released a video saying we're still looking for the pipe bomber. And then you now have the current people in charge saying that they want to try to float out we've solved the pipe bomber case and it was just a training exercise. That's what we're going to do? Okay. Tracking. I got it. Yeah. Why don't you dismantle? And so 2,000 people's lives were interrupted. And what is our payoff? Our trade-off is Letitia James for mortgage fraud and Jim Comey for lying under oath, maybe. That's going to be the play. It's not great, folks. It's actually so disappointing because they just don't know how to actually play that game. So they're really bad at it. So the other team's going to just ratchet it up. If you guys are listening over on the audio platform, you may hear an ad from Spotify right now. I'd like to give you guys the heads up. If you're listening anywhere else, make sure you're liking our videos. We're on Rumble, we're on YouTube, we're on X, we play on Locals. If you guys have a problem with the feed over there, you can always check it out on Spotify at KyleSerafinshow.com. You can go back there, but otherwise, wherever you're at, make sure you guys are subscribed. If you want to know when we go live, it's generally at 0930, except on Columbus Day when I'm a few minutes late, 0930 Eastern time. Yep. And this is the one-man program. This is it. This is the entirety of the show. You guys can see it here on screen. If you were listening and you're listening on Apple Podcasts or if you're on iHeartRadio and you're like, I can't see because you're just talking. Yeah, if you were on the Spotify app, you could push a button and you could actually go to visual for just a second, even if you just wanted to see what the studio space looks like. I want to do a little bit more on this government shutdown piece, and then we'll get into the coverage of the Hamas terrorist scenario and the trade the Israelis are getting right now. They're making a big deal out of it. In fact, the headline was, God bless the peacemaker, peacemaker being Donald Trump. Kind of interesting when Israel is actually adopting Christian language that comes from the Sermon on the Mount, and the blessed are the peacemakers, one of the Beatitudes. It's kind of a paraphrasing. I'm not sure how I feel about it either. I did see that there is a no resolution in sight. None whatsoever. There's no resolution in sight for the federal government shutdown. Ain't that something? They're still worried about it over there. They can't help it. It's always about the same stuff. A government resolution to the shutdown seems further away than ever. That's the claim. Stephen Collison's little bit from CNN. The Trump administration is trying to take this quiver or take this arrow out of the quiver of congressional Democrats. What they're trying to do is pay the military. And they're trying to do it in a way that's going to be like an off-books paying. Basically, Trump has given Hegseth the order, hey, find a way, do what needs to be done so that we don't have to have this emotional thing hanging over our backs. The pain is deepening, says Collinson. Republicans and Democrats are becoming angrier and more estranged over a government shutdown with no end in sight. The funny thing is that, like I said, many of us don't actually experience any of this. The light's probably still turned on at your house. The water still functions. The toilet's still flush. Your car still starts. There's still local cops out there that are doing speed traps and making sure that people are not speeding, right? Burglaries are being investigated. Alarms are still being dispatched. So residential and business alarms, they still have cops showing up for all the things that matter. The impasse is heading towards a third week with hundreds of thousands of federal workers are furloughed. Oh my God, this is where it gets really bad. I told you the other day they shut down the Jimmy Carter Presidential Museum, so that was pretty terrible. The Smithsonian Museums and the National Zoo are closed, people. It might be time to pack up America when the Smithsonian and the National Zoo are closed. If you don't live in Washington, D.C., you might not have even known that that was an option, but they're closed, so they're not an option for you anymore. So don't go to D.C. if you want to go to the National Zoo. The nation's air traffic control system is becoming strained. No further information. There's a couple of sick outs. That's basically what happened, but they're still required to show up, just like the FBI shows up to work, just like I did when I was doing my job. The already acrimonious political duel took a nasty turn on Friday when the administration fired hundreds of bureaucrats to punish Democrats. It has to be punitive, right? They have to be punishing Democrats. They can't just say that our country has too many people that are relying on the federal government for a paycheck. And if you are a quote unquote, what's the word? Non-essential. If you're not essential, then maybe you don't get to keep working here. Again, everybody that's been declared non-essential in the federal government, if that's happened to you and you didn't take note and say, maybe I should have my resume in order. Maybe I should be able to find work somewhere else, just in case. Just in case. Why did you not do that? The already acrimonious political duel took a nasty turn. Hundreds of bureaucrats were fired to punish Democrats, although dismissals for the CDC were hurriedly canceled. Repercussions of the shutdown are getting more serious as a slow boil crisis worsens. This is supposed to be analytical, and in fact, all of this stuff is just emotional. It's the same kind of emotion that's being used on people that run our law enforcement agencies, saying that you can't disband parts of it. It's the same thing that gets told to people that work in the intelligence community, saying, if you are not doing intelligence, then something terrible will happen. We know that they haven't disrupted it on the law enforcement side, because if they did, they'd be touting it. They'd be screaming about it. They'd be sharing the systems that they've interrupted and dismantled. Senate Democrats are refusing to vote for a short-term bill to fund the government until Republicans extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies that are set to expire at the end of the year and agree to roll back President Trump's Medicaid cuts. This is the argument for the clean CR. By the way, I love this. I think Republicans' positions are weak. They want to get a clean CR, which means they're going to fund things back at Biden levels. I think that's a loss. I think that not funding the government at this tremendously ridiculous rate would be a win for people. It's kind of like saying we actually have we don't just have any inflation right now. It's actually shrinking. You're like, wait, shrinking? You're deflating the currency, so it's becoming worth more. Outstanding. That sounds great. And they're like, no, we aim for 2% inflation. You're like, so you want me to lose 2% of my savings if I don't have it earning more than 2%? You want my savings to actually be worth less every single year. That's your target. By the way, that is the target. Only our government could define loss as win. They continue to do it. Both sides believe that, by the way. 2% inflation is supposed to be the goal that the Fed is doing. The apolitical, nonpartisan Fed. Every year, your money is worth less. Every single month, it's worth less. My buddy Phil Kennedy posted, stop complaining about inflation. It's going to happen for the inevitable future. It's going to continue on because both sides think that it's acceptable. Nobody wants to do this stuff. Nobody wants to actually cut the government. Not the left, not the right. So they play these roles. And if you're the guy out there calling it out, there are some real conservative people that say this stuff. I feel like I'm one of them. I just don't like government, period. I think that it's a necessary evil that we have to sort of endure. And the most that we can contain it, the better. I did a whole write-up. I did an article one time that was discussing how government is like what do they call that stuff? Ground cover, like ivy. If you guys ever had ivy, it can be really pretty. You can fill it in certain areas. It'll fill up around trees. It'll creep a little bit. But if you let it just go, it'll grow into your lawn. It'll grow up the trees. It'll choke out bushes. So the only way that you keep ground cover like ivy in check is that you give it hard boundaries and you regularly police those boundaries with a weed eater. You have to do those things. You have to constantly prune it or it will grow out of control. And if you're not paying attention, it does. And what do you get? You get gold going over $4,000 an ounce. You get silver up over $50 an ounce. You get all of our money is worth nothing. You get people who are crying about their paychecks, even though their jobs are non-essential, when we know for a fact that we don't need them because nobody notices that they're not going to work. You don't notice. You just notice that there's less traffic in the places that you think were too traffic if you happen to live in the DC area. All of that stuff tells you that the pruning is necessary, but nobody wants to fire up the weed eater and just do it. Ivy is a great analogy, by the way, for federal government and its natural creep. Because as designed, it's kind of great. But the funny thing about ivy is it's also a really, really good hiding grounds for things like rats and mice and spiders and snakes, like vermin and creepy crawlies can all hang out in there. And it covers them. And if you walk through ivy, and I had it when I was growing up, I lived in Northern California, we had ground cover that was ivy. You walk through there, was always like something running and scurrying. What the hell is it? Yeah, that's what our government is like. As long as you maintain it in a certain area, we all kind of accept that it's going to be a little bit corrupted. And that's fine. That's totally fine. In so much as we live in a fallen world. But remember, the same difference that we keep hammering in on. My wife and I talked about this over the weekend as well. Every single time that you reach out to someone that's on the left, the people that are at the No Kings rally that are not my enemy, they do have this real weird thing that they believe in. They believe in this sophomoric, teenage, juvenile thing that people are inherently good. I think this is going to segue nicely into the story of trading over hostages with Hamas. People are inherently good. They want to do the right thing. That human beings are naturally giving and loving and not selfish and not manipulative. In contrast to all human experience, by the way. The funniest thing about being raised in a faith tradition is that you can believe that people have this thing that in Christianity we call original sin. Original sin, it starts with pride. It's the attempt to rival that which is of God. By the way, this is the story that was told for many, many faith traditions had it. Even the pagans have it. Doesn't matter whether you're talking about Icarus or you're talking about Babel or anything else. When you try to rival the positions of the divine as a human being, you find yourself humbled. And we all have that instinct. We all have the instinct to do that. So when you look at people, if you think that they are endowed with the spark of divinity and they all want to do right, but if only the systems didn't ruin them. George Floyd was an inherently good man who was abused by a dangerous, bad system. You have to believe in contrast to all human experience for all of human time. You have to. That's the only way that you can believe these things. Or you can believe what we believe on the right. We live in a fallen world. We are fallen people. We all sin regularly. Whatever you call that thing that you do that you are not supposed to do. You know what it is because you feel a thing called guilt. The leftists want to get rid of shame and guilt on purpose because then they can actually justify that everything they're doing is morally good. It's so funny. If you believe that the problem is the system, and if we just had a perfect enough system, if we just implemented communism properly, if we could just get there, then it would all be right. That believes this naive nonsense that suddenly, if we just had people in their native state. There's something I learned when I was in sophomore. I was in Linda Felice's sophomore English class, and it was called The Myth of the Noble Savage. If you guys ever studied literature, there are reasons to study the liberal arts and literature. And I recall this from a very capable, formative high school experience. The myth of the noble savage is one of the foundational American myths, but it's also a foundational leftist idea that people closer to nature with less constraints will be godly. In complete contrast to the actual experience of the people that were native to this country when we got here, who were total savages. Some of them were more peaceful than others, but they were like beheading each other and cutting out hearts and eating things and sacrificing children and burning women and doing all kinds of other savagery because that's just what they did. Because people left to their native, doesn't mean the Europeans didn't do it too. There's examples of human beings acting horribly because we are all fallen creatures. The left kind of believes this other thing. That's why you see all this this cry to, we're on stolen land and this hippie nonsense of the indigenous people. We need to give honor to the ancestors. Shut up. Shut up. Nonsense. So in that sort of scenario, we get to cover the story of Hamas, which the left has started championing. If you believe the people on the left, then you believe that the people of Hamas are victims, that they had no choice but circumstances. And if they actually just had a perfect system of being left alone, if Israel, the big meanie, left them alone, then they wouldn't have had to fly a bunch of lawnmowers in the sky with little para-wings and go and kill and rape and destroy people's lives. They wouldn't have had to attack Israel if they were just left alone and allowed to have free rule. And then the people on the right, let's call it center right, the Fox News crowd, they believed, oh, very bad, evil Hamas. If they had just not done anything bad, then Israel would be fair and friendly and would continue to be a good and just ruler. And then you can have people in the middle. And I say, none of you eat bacon and you're not my people. And at the end of the day, it's pretty clear to me. It seems very obvious that the very sophisticated intelligence apparatus in Israel allowed this thing to go down. That they are simply part of the occupation. They are part of the regime, the machine. Hamas falls very neatly into the category of resistance, fill in the blank. And so we have the us and them mentality, and we all have to pick a team, except the people that don't want to pick a team. What if we just don't want to fund any of it and let them sort that crap out over there? We keep getting lured into this nonsense. Here you have it. 2 hostages previously believed held alive on a list published by Hamas. They're not alive, apparently. That's the story. The story is that we are now beginning the hostage exchange. And so it's a great success, or is it? Depends on who you have covering it. Here is CNN. I've got CNN, CBS, and Fox. We're going to kind of look at all these things right now. We're going to see the way that they all covered it. Everybody's got kind of a thing. And then we have this sort of very glorified, prideful coverage in Israel of Donald Trump, calling him the peacemaker. Interesting that Donald Trump said that he would like to be thought of that way. Why not play to the guy's ego? He's an ego guy. In any case, I think all of this stuff is just worth watching from the outside because at the end of the day, I don't know how much any of us have to do with any of this. Unless you have family in Israel. There's a small number of people in the United States that do. But generally speaking, it's none of my neighbors. It's none of the people that I talk to on a daily basis. I have no skin in this game. I continue to say that. I could just watch it and just go, what's this about? Here's Caitlin Collins, who begrudgingly is going to say, great work, Donald Trump, I guess.
Are covering a historic moment here in Israel because for the first time in 2 years, over 2 years, 738 days, Hamas holds no living hostages in its captivity for the first time. We are still waiting word on when the bodies of the deceased hostages that were still in Hamas's captivity and hands will be handed over to their families and to their loved ones here in Israel, something that they have stressed is just as important as bringing home the live hostages. But we have confirmed all 20 live hostages have now been handed over to the Israeli Defense Forces, and marking a pivotal moment in a ceasefire that the president confirmed had been brokered last Thursday. And now here we are on Monday morning, and we have seen these 20 live hostages handed over and returned to Israeli soil. We're waiting for.
Is it just me, or is it really obvious that this was done on a news cycle? Do you guys know that if it was negotiated on a Thursday or on a Friday, then they could have just had people handed over on those days, but they waited till the beginning of the week. So it would get the whole week of coverage. It's all staged for that. I'm just telling you, if you want a news story to die, release it on a Friday. Release it on late Thursday, and nobody will care. Or you could do this. Front page, Monday morning, Jerusalem Post, God bless the peacemaker. And there it is. And even NPR has to say, what a great job. It's a major milestone. Hamas releases final group of living Israeli hostages. So we'll read from NPR, who also seems, some of these people seem kind of like they're in this weird moment where they have to begrudgingly back a little bit of the middle line because they have a Jewish audience as well. But the Jewish audience kind of like leans sort of leftist. So they're not really sure, how do you say this without being anti-Semitic? Right? Because they have to be careful. They want to try to live up a little bit to their own standards. They'd like to continue to be able to call people on the right anti-Semitic, but at the same time, how do you do that when Donald Trump is out there making negotiations? Hamas on Monday released the last living 20 hostages from Gaza as part of the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. In the exchange, Israel was expected to release nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. You could read that two ways. You could read it in so much as, well, Israel had 2,000 hostages and Hamas only had 20. Or you could say that Israel keeps people alive and they put them through a prison situation and that they have more of a system of justice that favors, like, I don't know, the ability to release them. Or you could say what they value, that they value them at 10 to 1, 20 to 1, 100 to 1 rather. There's a lot of different ways that these things can be spun. It's interesting to see the ratios. The ratios always tend to favor people who care more about people. There are certain groups that tend to value human beings more. And so if the Israelis are willing to do, it's 100 to 1. Am I wrong? Is that not how the numbers are shaking out here? 100 to 1. That's a big ratio of how much they value their citizens. It's also a big propaganda piece. It also has allowed them to do all the things they wanted. What did they manage to do since October 7th of, 2023? Israel was able to get the United States to go after Iran in a way that they've been wanting for decades. They've been able to reduce a huge chunk of Gaza to rubble, which we've seen the pictures of. They've exposed people on the loony left. They've solidified power on people that are 100% now pro-Israel, like to the point where you've got people like like Mark Levine out there screaming about it when people have to show fealty to this other country. And they've come out publicly and said it. All this stuff is interesting. And it also does divide this country because at the end of the day, it's like, it's not America. Hamas initiated the handover of the first of 7 living hostages to the International Committee of the Red Cross, in turn presented them to the Israeli military. The military flew those hostages to southern Israel to hospitals in the Tel Aviv area. I think I've got some footage of that here. Pulled that thing out. Looks like this.
The way for more positive relations between Israel and Europe. But of course, it goes beyond just Gaza. Another angle that Europeans and Israelis have actually been more aligned was on the issue of Iran a few months back. So Europeans actually were in favor of the United States and Israel targeting Iranian military and nuclear infrastructure. So to paint a picture, ultimately, Israel's relations with Europe has not necessarily been tainted because there's still other areas that they're working on. But the issue of Gaza particularly was of concern. And now hopefully with the aid trucks going into Gaza, and now there are more discussions of ceasefires, and now we've seen actually the celebrations on the streets of Gaza that the ceasefire has been reached. Hopefully we will see a more positive light. We see this developments through a more positive light between Israel and Europe.
And you'll notice I'm keeping this on your screen because you can see the hostages being reunited with their families and friends. This is just one of the images we've seen, but you saw them kind of unfurl the Israeli flag there. But folks are now going to go into the hospital. Again, they will be checked out and then released to their family after they are checked out by the doctors there. My last question for you here is, what do we need to be watching?
My question is does anyone think that this is the end of this conflict? Does anyone think that there's not going to be more hostages? There's not going to be more of this going on, that this is somehow done? Does anyone think that? Is this a permanent and lasting peace between two groups? They just needed Donald Trump? I don't think so. I don't. I just don't. I think this is a momentary distraction. It's an opportunity for some people to do job well done. It's an opportunity to put Donald Trump's face in the sand. This is pretty wild. This is coming from CNN. If you guys are not seeing this, it's worth seeing this image.
There was this banner that was displayed on the beach in Tel Aviv, a giant thank you, just to kind of speak to the moment, Sarah, of what kind of Israel is bracing for right now, as the president is expected to be here. He's only going to be here for less than 5 hours on the ground in Jerusalem, but he'll be speaking to the members of the parliament. He'll be meeting families of hostages and hostages themselves, and partaking in that, as we see him also standing alongside the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu.
It all just is an opportunity to say, great job for whatever side you're on. People in Gaza cheering, people in Israel cheering, people on Fox News cheering, acting like somehow, what? This just seems like business as usual. Don't they just always do this? Am I crazy that they just do this all the time and nobody's actually getting anything out of it? This is just a protracted conflict. And this is one little bump of quiet. People said, did they do that on a beach? Yeah, they did it on a beach. All right, here's Fox News with a Fox News alert, letting you know. Dun dun.
"11:34 in the morning on this Monday in Israel. It is a historic day, and you are watching history unfold. This is the Knesset in Jerusalem, the Israeli parliament building. President Trump has been invited to speak to the Knesset. He has been obviously very involved in the peace negotiations that have resulted in what you see on the banner at the bottom of your screen there. All 20 living hostages now confirmed to have been released by Hamas. Israel is releasing nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners in return. And there are the bodies of 28 hostages who died while in horrific conditions in Hamas captivity. Those bodies are going to be returned in the coming days, perhaps weeks, because it is not known where all of them are.
It's not known because they lost the hostages, so the bodies can't be. I just went to NBC News. What do we know? Trump's in Israel. He's addressing the parliament, the Knesset. And then he's going to join a Middle East peace summit in Egypt. Is that just like what we do now, by the way, people? It's so hard for me knowing that there have been Middle East peace summits my entire life, and they will likely be ongoing forever because we have some warring ideologies, of which I'm not one of either, it turns out. I'm not one of either of them. And I don't really care what goes on over there. I continue to be kind of America only. It's not that I don't care about what happens in the United States or our stance going outside. I can't get excited about this stuff because all of this just feels theatrical. Hostages transferred. All 20 surviving hostages were released. A group of 7 returned to Israel. 13 are on their way back after being released from Gaza. To be released, the names of others. They just said that there. They announced they only have 4 bodies of the 28. So they lost 24 bodies somewhere. Okay, they killed people. Palestinian prisoner exchange. Hamas pledged to release hostages in exchange for 250 prisoners serving life sentences and 1,700 who were detained as a result of the group's attack on October the 7th. This feels like catch and release. They're going to just do this again in a couple years. You think those people are less radicalized from like hanging out in an Israeli prison? No, they're just making friends, finding out who it is, and they're going to go do it again. Scale of war. Here you go. This is how NBC wraps it up. More than 67,000 people have been killed in Israel's offense on Gaza, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, which is totally a reputable organization, obviously. I mean, you have to believe them. My point is maybe there were 67,000 people killed. I think they knew that when they went in on October the 7th. I think the Israelis knew that they were going to have an opportunity to go do that and do it on the world stage and be justified. Again, you don't have to encourage people or set it up. You can just let people do the thing that they were going to do anyway and just stay out of their way so you have justification and authorization to do it. And then yellow journalists will just pick it up and run with it. How many people said this is the worst attack since 9/11? It's 20 9/11s for Israel. What would America do? It's like, well, America would have just done it on their own. We wouldn't need anyone else to fund us. We don't need anyone else to co-sign on it. If we want to go and invade a country, we could. But we're always getting set up with this nonsense. And then a couple years later, you find out, they probably lied about all that stuff. They probably manipulated the news. And if you're the one calling it out, you're the black sheep. How dare you? How dare you sit in the middle and say that all of you are terrible? How dare you be someone that doesn't just go with the machine? The machine works just fine if you could just shut your mouth and let us spend all of our money on wars and take all your tax dollars. If you could just shut up and get out of the way and let us claim that this is our FBI now, or that Israel's victorious and they're the moral good, when everybody is kind of living in a moral gray. Everybody has to deny reality of their own experience in order to play with this. And it seems like people are totally comfortable with that. They get really, really excited to just get on a team. I love being on a team. It's really fun to be on a team, but the team actually has to have like parameters, goals, and a very unified, and the rules of the game have to be fair. How many of you want to be on a team when there are no rules? Why? Why would you want to be on that team? It's terrible. Scale of war. Large swaths of the enclave in Gaza have been destroyed. Famines have been declared in parts of northern Gaza. 1,200 people were killed, and about 250 were taken hostage on the October 7th attack on Israel. So they do get into there. That was the human cost. 1,200 people killed. If any country came over, if Mexico came over and killed 1,200 Texans and captured 250 people there, we would level Mexico. I get it, 100%. But what if we found out that the American federal government allowed that to happen, like they did in the Biden administration where they opened the border up? What would we do? Close the border and then declare victory? Oh, wait, we already did that. You're not supposed to notice that. Let me throw some last things out there because I mentioned it. Chinese situation. The Chinese have released a statement, which is worth talking about in more theatrical posturing and nonsense. This is the real threat to America, for whatever it's worth. For all of you that think Israel is the one out there pulling all the strings and levers in the federal government or doing all the nefarious things that happen online, I'm going to just give you a real quick heads up. The Chinese, there are more people working on behalf of, like either directly or indirectly, the Chinese MSS than all of Israel's government and military and civil operations combined by a lot. They've got like 800,000 people working for MSS. That's their intelligence agency, their lead intelligence agency. China vows to stand firm against Trump's 100% tariff threat, which is why you may have seen stocks crumble. Don't panic or freak out. That's just the nature of things. This thing will swing back up again as it continues. They're just negotiating a point. But I did think that these tariffs were supposed to fund. We weren't supposed to have income taxes. Can I cancel my plans to pay an accountant and do my taxes next year? Is that still on the list? I haven't seen Congress act on this yet. China signaled Sunday it wouldn't back down from the face of a 100% threat or a 100% tariff threat from Donald Trump. Urged the U.S. to resolve the differences through negotiations instead of threats. The threats are part of the negotiation, which they know and we know and you know if you're paying attention. All of this stuff is the same. China's stance is consistent. We don't want a tariff war, but we're not afraid of one, they said, holding a strong position. It's the first official comment since he said that he would jack up taxes on imports from China on November 1st in response to new Chinese restrictions on the exports of rare earth products, which are going to be your rare earth minerals and so on. Things that we don't necessarily have. Commerce Ministry said frequently resorting to the threat of high tariffs is not the correct way to get along with China, as it considers itself an equal to the United States. And in many ways, it is our biggest geopolitical threat. And we continue to act like somebody else is. So if you're on the political right and you think it's Israel, and that's who bought our government, just going to tell you, they're laughing all the way to the bank. They've taken over big chunks of Africa. They're doing all kinds of wild things. They have insane amounts of people here operating on their behalf. If you don't want it to be the case, I love it. I see people saying repeal the 16th and the 17th. We can start rolling back this country. We can handle the things that are actually within our control and our parameters. But that would actually involve governing like in a conservative way, doesn't it? That would actually involve doing the things that we expect, quote unquote, our team to do. We don't do that. And if you say that you should, then you are the identified patient. You are the black sheep. God forbid you actually be an actual conservative person who believes in a constitutional rule and think that this republic is supposed to work the way it was designed. You're the issue then. Can't have it. So you'll continually be ostracized, called out. You're not a team player. You're the bad guy. I will continue to make this argument. The real Republicans are the ones that many of you call rhinos. The real Republicans are the ones who operate underneath the principles of when our team is on top, then everything is good. And when our team is on bottom, then everything is bad. But nothing has to do with principles. And no one cares about what's actually true. Those are the real Republicans. If you are a conservative constitutionalist, if you believe in limited federal government, if you think that our money supply should not be run by the Fed, if you think that there shouldn't be an income tax and that your state unit should actually be the governing body that has the most impact on you as a person, if you are a conservative, then you are a Republican in name only, or you could be like me, you can be a post-partisan person who is generally voting Republican because they're the best of the two, but they suck. And you will be the identified patient in your family, or in your friend group, or in your GOP committee. I'll go speak to GOP groups. I've done it before. I'm happy to talk to Republican groups because oftentimes the grassroots level, they all think the way I do. And then they turn around and they vote for national prominence people who immediately get sucked into this machine. And it doesn't matter whether it's an Eli Crane out in Arizona who talked big talk and then suddenly didn't have 5 minutes for an FBI whistleblower who was right down the street from him, or a Dan Bongino, the renegade Republican who ran for office and tried to do it his way and knew he couldn't get it done. And so now he's got appointed into some federal position, who knew all the problems and told you about him every day, and then suddenly got there and now he's freaking cheerleading these people. They all work the same way. They all do. Anyway, don't be afraid of being a black sheep. It's not that big a deal. And if you're a black sheep on some other things, this is a really fun one. This is a palate cleanse for you guys. Again, I'll remind you, watch us over on Spotify, watch us over on YouTube. Those are the two biggest places that are growing, especially for our revenue. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it does pay us better. Rumble is another option as usual. You guys over in the Rumble chat, you guys are finding out they're screwing with our videos. That's just what they do. X, same story. You can watch us over on one of the monetized platforms. We'd appreciate it, but I'll take the views wherever they're at. We appreciate all of you guys, so make sure you're liking the videos if you're seeing them. Let's do something funny. Only funny because it's so insane how true this is. This is a Dan Rather clip from 1982. If you think that we haven't been lied to about the same things for so long, this will put it in perspective. Imagine someone telling you that 25% of Florida was going to be underwater in 1982, saying that in the future that's what would happen. It's probably the same as someone telling you that the hostage situation and that the conflict between the Hamas and Israel has been ended today, and blessed are the peacemakers. I kind of see them as being the same thing. You're just selling me BS. You're selling me something for advertising for today. Luckily, the internet's forever, and so are the television newsreels. This is Dan Rather telling you the real existential threat that faces us is greenhouse gases. I haven't seen as much about climate change under this Trump administration for some reason. I wonder why that is. Maybe people realize that they just want to be able to afford, living.
Concern about rising temperatures on planet Earth heated up a hearing here in Washington today. For years, scientists have theorized about the dangers of the so-called greenhouse effect, the warming of the Earth's atmosphere due to the burning of coal and oil. And in recent months, as David Culhane reports, research has uncovered facts to support that theory.
Many scientists claim that the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere has been rising over the past 100 years, that the great sheets of pack ice in Antarctica are melting at a much more rapid rate than previously. And finally, that the sea level has been rising with increasing swiftness over the past 40 years. If these scientists are correct, about 25% of Florida would be flooded, along with low-lying areas all over the world. Climate changes could produce widespread disruption of agriculture. The American farm belt might be too dry, and the wheat and corn crops would have to move to Canada. Scientists blame the odorless, colorless carbon dioxide gas for these potentially dangerous changes around the planet. It is the greenhouse effect. The gas allows sunlight to filter down and warm the Earth. But like the glass of a greenhouse, the carbon dioxide tends to trap heat so that it cannot rise into space. The scientists maintain that the coal, oil, and gas we've been burning for 100 years have produced more and more carbon dioxide and helped overheat the Earth. Now, some political leaders endorse the demands for more CO2 monitoring stations, like this one in Hawaii. And they share the anger of the scientists at Reagan administration budget cuts at a time when they feel closer to getting definitive answers.
We are not doing the kind of research that we should be doing to determine whether or not these scientists who are so alarmed are correct in their assessment.
And what they find out will affect the lives and fortunes of millions of people, the very survival of cities like this one. David Culhane, CBS News, New York.
All of you that contributed to that put the hole in the ozone layer with your spray cans and your big hair, shame on you. For all of you that were using Freon instead of R134A, all of you people that had air conditioning units, shame on all of you for destroying this planet. Al Gore was very pissed back then that we were not funding the government to do the things to find out if the problem that we believe actually exists in reality, because we need to fund the government to be able to find that out. And that's why he created the internet. Anyway, luckily, the internet is forever, at least for now. Enjoy all that nonsense. If you guys think that we haven't been buying these narratives forever, they don't call it yellow journalism anymore. They call it fake news or tabloid or clickbait. But shoot, it's a very old tactic, and we can all be pulled into it. And I think we all are. All right, I'll see you guys again tomorrow. I hope you have a nice Columbus Day. What Trump said to the Italians. Have a good one. God bless you. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.